Hi, good morning. I'm going to start off with continuing the chapter one notes with entrepreneurship today. It's a little bit down. We did the first section the other day in class. Um, so, entrepreneurship, this is coming from the chapter one notes, which is right here. I can open that up and scroll down, and we'll get down to entrepreneurship today. This is a pretty long chapter. It's really important just to kind of go through it. If you finish the notes, you can turn them in. I won't finish them in this session. I'll finish the notes in the next session that I speak. Uh, I'm going to start doing this, I hope, posting the notes, and you can choose to do them on your own time. I'll give you class time, but you can do them whenever you get to them. Um, in entrepreneurship today, it starts off with talking about the knowledge of economics. It's contributing to understanding how people and consumers interact. That's really important. I mean, it's not just that though. It's not just how consumers interact. It's to me, understanding economics can help me as an entrepreneur take advantage of economic things that are happening around us. If I have an understanding of how interest rates are moving, I might be able to change what kind of money I'm borrowing. So if I borrow for a house, a good example would that be in 1999, I think I had a $400,000 loan and it was 7%, 7.1% interest. That loan was something like over $4,000 a month. So interest rates started coming down, and I could see that interest rates were coming down, and I had a prediction that they were going to continue to come down, which ended up being true. So what I did is I continued to refinance my loan, and also I chose to refinance the loan at a like a 3-year ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage, instead of locking it in at a fixed rate. Often, if you lock a loan at a fixed rate, you might get you might get some lower interest today. Usually, you would get a higher interest historically. Interest rates are a little odd right now, which I'll talk about later. But if you take a long-term loan, you also have to sometimes pay a lot of closing costs. So if you're going to refinance that loan over and over and over, it doesn't make sense to take that long-term loan and pay closing costs. And if you don't pay closing costs, the costs are still built into the rate, so your rate would be inflated because you got the mortgage company to pay the closing costs for you. They're going to get their money one way or the other. So what I was able to do is I knew what type of loan to take, and I kept refinancing that. So like every 4 months, I'd refinance this 3-month loan, and eventually I got the loan down from over $4,000 a month to like $2,200 a month. So it's 18. It was almost $2,000 savings over the course of about a year and a half that I was able to do, just because I had an idea of what was happening in the economic world around me and what particularly the prediction I had on interest rates. So, if anything, I highly recommend anybody that's going to be in business pay attention to economics, read about economics. If you're going to college and you're getting a business degree, you'll have to take macro and microeconomics to get that business degree in most colleges. Economics is the study of how people allocate their resources. It uses the word scarce, and scarce means that, and the reason they say scarce is because resources are like natural resources and people resources, capital resources, which is money, buildings, and equipment. They're not infinite. But yet, in the study of economics, they start with this basic theory. We'll get in the next section about the fact that wants are unlimited and our resources are limited, right? But we want everything, but we don't have everything to get everything with it. So that creates this problem called scarcity, that there's an unlimited, that people chase goods. So if everybody wants the same thing, they're going to chase these goods because the goods are unlimited, and it's going to eventually drive up prices. We have to figure out how to allocate our resources as an individual. That means allocating the money you have individually. Where are you going to spend that money on? What are you going to put that money on into? Because it's not infinite. Most of us don't have infinite money or aren't ultra wealthy. Economic systems is each each system, right? And that could be like a country or multiple countries, and we're in multinational economic systems right now. That even though each country may have an economic systems and rules and guidelines, we're affected by other people's other countries' systems as well. So but each system has a set of rules and laws and institutions to go by. Institutions, for example, we have the Federal Reserve in America. That is a federal agency created in 1913, and that Federal Reserve has a lot of ways they can manage some people feel, manipulate the economic system. They can fluctuate the interest rates. They set the rates that they can charge banks. They can basically get more money into the economy. When we have an economic downturn, like now with COVID, they buy up bonds and things from pension funds and give pension funds the money. Basically, that's kind of what they call the printing of money. Another way that they can get money into the economy, also they call the printing of money, is through quantitative easing, which is they put all these bonds on the market and sell them, and it brings the interest rates down and creates more cash flow. If there's more cash flow in the economy, then there should be more easy ability to borrow money, especially for entrepreneurs and businesses and corporations. If they can borrow money cheaper and easier, it's supposed to increase economic activity. So every system has these institutions and different ways of doing it. I'll compare some of them later, which is probably the best part of this lecture that you should check out. Each economic system has to answer these four basic questions. What are they going to produce? The quantity of goods and services, how much it should be produced, how it's going to be produced, and how services are also produced. We're always talking about goods and services. And for whom? Who's going to benefit from that production? If you look at a purely communist command economy, a command economy is when the government dictates all these questions. They decide how much is going to be produced. They decide for whom. They decide how. They tell the corporations exactly what to do, or they run the businesses themselves. That would be traditionally like communist Russia in 1950 or communist China in 1960. And one thing I want to talk about, those systems, right, are command systems. Don't confuse communism with command economy. Command economy just means the government is in control. It doesn't have to be a communist system. It could be some other type of political system could have a command economy. Just traditionally in the world in the 20th century to now, command economies have been instituted by communist countries, and free market economies have been more likely instituted by democratic countries. And I use the word democratic loosely, as if you're into, history or politics, you know that we're not actually a pure democracy. Most democratic nations, though we're going to use the democratic nation word loosely, is a free enterprise, which means in general, we believe in the idea that people have the right to choose what they want to make if they want to run a business. They have the right to own a business. They have a right to buy their own goods. They have a right to save money. They have a right to own land. The ownership of private property, extremely important in a free enterprise system. In a purely command economy, no citizens may even be allowed to own land at all. It may be all owned by the government. It may be rented out to people, but traditionally owned by the government. Or they get to decide who gets to own the land, which to me is even a scarier concept. The other real key component of free enterprise system, and what we all want to do if you're in entrepreneurship, is you get the right to make a profit. This is not a guaranteed thing, making a profit in the world. In some countries, if you make too much profit, they take that profit away from you. These ideas are being discussed all the time in our current political and economic makeup in the United States. So how much profit people should be able to take, for instance. Should Jeff Bezos be able to be worth $200 billion, which he's worth more than $200 billion now, because Amazon keeps going up the stock price every day. And so we have the general idea that, yeah, people can have profit, but there's a lot of pushback about how much profit that should be. And again, profit is your money left over in a business after you've deducted all of your expenses from the income you made. The perfect competition, really doesn't exist, first of all. Perfect competition is a market structure in which there are numerous buyers and sellers, and no buyer or seller can affect the price by themselves. So it means there's enough companies in the industry that the prices that they have to compete with each other. And the companies are competing with each other to decide what to make, how much to make of something, what to charge of something. The idea is that the prices will come into equilibrium with what the buyers want. That's the real key of a free market system. It's supply and demand. We'll talk about that in the next section a lot more. competition is not absolute in America. There's a lot of things where we can control competition, and the U.S. government has been controlling competition since 1890. And a monopoly is when basically one company creates a product and creates the opportunity for people to buy that product and sells that product, and then they can set whatever price they want. A monopoly usually ends up into with the company overcharging for the product, and it doesn't have to be the case. If the company was wise, they probably charge a reasonable amount for the product, because our U.S. government has antitrust laws. Anti meaning against, and trust means one, control. And these antitrust laws were set up. They go back to 1890 with the Antitrust Sherman Act. I'll pull it up here. Standard Oil. So Standard Oil, the Rockefellers own not just the oil, but the tankers for the oil, all the equipment to make the oil, all the oil production, all the gas production from oil, and all the selling of the gas. So they owned everything in the United States. And here there was an act passed in 1890 called the Sherman Antitrust Act that allowed the government to sue companies and break them up. So in 1906, the U.S. government brought a suit against Standard Oil, and by 1911, they dissolved Standard Oil into many companies. And some of these companies you still see are around today, remnants of the original Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. Mobil's still around. Amoco's still around. They used to have a big building downtown named after them. Chevron Corporation is one of the largest oil companies. And then back in eventually British Petroleum also purchased out the rest of Standard Oil Company, Ohio, in 1987. So you can see that the point is that the U.S. government can break up a company. They did it in 1984 with Ma Bell. Ma Bell was the original AT&T. They owned all the phone lines. There was no internet. There was all hardline phones. And they broke up Ma Bell and had turned it into, I think, 12 or 13, they called them the Baby Bell, which were 12 or 13 regional companies. They were kind of quasi-governmental because they controlled the price structures that they could charge. That's kind of went away now because we have more competition with the internet and phone services through the internet. But you also hear recently of like the government has to approve like mergers of certain cell phone companies because they want to make sure that the market is not a monopoly. The other thing that can happen in a market is it could become an oligopoly. Excuse me. An oligopoly is there's also rules against oligopolies, which is when a few companies control the market for something. And that's what I was kind of talking about with the internet or cell phones. You have AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile. They keep wanting to merge and do different things, and the government has to approve those mergers. Here is just kind of going back to saying that there are really still only a handful of large oil companies controlling the market and gasoline station companies controlling the market. I'm going to show one more thing, and this is probably the most interesting thing. I just wanted to draw this. So we're talking about the difference of a command and a free market economy. And if I said this was command, right there, and this is a free market, or we also call it capitalism, right? And I want you to understand that nobody is all the way over here or over here. There's a continuum. Like if this is the middle, pretty much every business or every country in the world is a mixed market economy. And they don't talk about it much in the book, but it's a mixed market. I don't write very well with the stylus, but it's a mixed market economy. So if I took China, right, and if this was 1960, China would have been way over here. And the U.S., we weren't full capitalism. We probably would have been somewhere in here, right? And if you took Cuba, who became communist in 1960, they were way over here too. So you had China and Cuba and Russia, right? And there's still elements of like the black market and people trading and selling small goods, but basically the government controls everything. They decided how much would I spelled Cuba right. They decided how much would be allocated to agricultural resources, for example. But if you took this same continuum, right, and you said today, there's a lot of discussion about this. If this is the mixed market and this was the US then, the US has so many rules and regulation that it might be here right now. And this is just me guessing. This is just guessing about the theory, okay? So, and China, a lot of times it's easier to start a business right now in China than it is in the US. In some ways, if you just talk about economics only, right? China could even be argued to be this side of the US, which is pretty crazy compared to historical norms. Now, the difference is if you took the social control of the society, this is economic control. But if we took the social control, China's social control is way over here to controlled by the country, right? It's very command. This is the social control. And the US social control, well, it's moving this way. It has been moving this way for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest reasons is maybe what people would propose is that the ill of capitalism is it creates inequality of wealth. And we have a lot of inequality of wealth. And our country is trying to figure out how to deal with that. So one way to deal with the inequality of wealth is try to give more supports to poorer people, but then that means more controls by the government. So again, I'm not stating any of my political opinions in class, but what I'm saying is we have been moving this way on the social control, and we're moving that way on the economic control. China has moved dramatically, and Russia this way on the economic control, but on the social control, they're pretty static. You might say that they've moved a little bit this way. All right, that sums up the lesson for today, and I'll see you in class.